Morning. Thank you for having me. First, let me just say, I think that being the third presenter on a Friday is a tough one, particularly if it's in the afternoon. But in the morning, it can be even just as tough. I had a situation a couple of years ago, and my empathy goes out to Kate for this as the moderator. I was in Chicago at a conference. I was one of the speakers on the panel, and the moderator was sitting up here on the dais with us. And it was a speaker who went on and on and on forever, and just they couldn't seem to stop. So first, the moderator was getting very whatever, and then started tapping the watch. That didn't seem to have effect. Took a piece of paper and wrote time, and was sitting there like this, and obviously that didn't have very much effect. So then took the gavel, hit the gavel on the block, the head shot off, hit somebody in the first row. With that, the moderator ran around, picked the person up, and the person said, "I can still hear him." So, now that I have your attention, we've just heard two very important people speaking on very important subjects. One, what are we going to do with compensation? And secondly, what's happening in the benefits area, and what do we need to do now, particularly before the last 26 days of this year? But I want to talk about executive compensation and where we expect it to go. And this is one of the hottest topics we believe that is out there. Earlier this week, I gave a presentation to an organization called SABEW, I guess is the way you pronounce it, S-A-B-E-W, which is made up of all of the major newspapers and media. And these were the reporters, the business reporters and editors. And one of the primary, all of the questions related obviously to executive compensation, one of the primary questions that was being asked was, who do we point the finger at for getting us in this mess, for putting in the programs that we are all talking about and we are reading about almost every day of the week? And clearly, they kept pointing fingers at the Compensation Committee. Now, I'd like to just I looked through the list of the attendees or the people who had been signed up for this, and I think you fall into one of four categories. One category which we'll discount, which is government. And is there anybody from the government? We're going to discount you. Okay. But the other three categories are very important because they are either the driving force or the resultants or the people who are going to be impacted by the regulations and so forth that we're seeing happening. And these are public companies. And remember, public companies, there's only about 50,000 total in the U.S. of publicly traded companies. And when we think of most of them, we're thinking of the really big boys, the 2,000, the Fortune 2000 and so forth. So it's really a very small fraternity that we're focused in on. If we talk about privately owned companies, and a number of you are from privately owned companies or foreign-owned companies doing business in the U.S., they're like a privately owned company for all intents and purposes with their regulations here. And there's somewhere in excess of 10 million of those in the U.S. Obviously, there's a lot of mom and pops, but there's also some very large ones. And then there's not-for-profits. And there's about 1.6 million not-for-profits. It has doubled in the last 10 years as far as the number of exempt organizations. And the reason I want to make those clarifications is because we have found too often that individuals think of themselves only in that little cubicle for which their business is, so that if you're in a publicly traded company, you figure the whole world is looking at you, which it is, but that it's not going to have any impact on the other areas. Or if you're in a not-for-profit, you have certain regulations that are peculiar to the not-for-profit exempt world that are very heavily influenced by what happens elsewhere, but they think that they're only in the not-for-profit sector. And of course, the privately owned companies figure they can do anything they want at this point, and that's not totally true either. So I think that's an important consideration. What I'm saying, in effect, is listen, because even though it may affect somebody else, it has a chance over the time. We're seeing much more homogenization of the rules, which means that the rules which affect one group seem to be migrating and affecting other groups. give you an example. It used to be when we talked about stock options and everything, automatically privately owned company people close their ears, and obviously the people in the not-for-profits where you don't have stock and equity, didn't even bother listening. The reality is, with the new regulations, the FASB 123R, that covers anybody that has stock. So it affects all of the privately owned companies also that have stock and use equity as a compensation tool. Anybody listen to NPR here? If not, I highly recommend you do. It's great, great programming and relatively unbiased. But they have a program that's called The Takeaway Show. And what they want to do is to try to leave you with tidbits of information that you can walk away with that are very important. And there's two I'd like to give you. Joan was mentioning acronyms earlier and the government's acronyms. There's two acronyms I'd like to add to that list, and these are my own. The first one is FARM, F-A-R-M. That stands for what the major objectives should be, and usually are, of designing any kind of compensation program. I'll start with the second letter, the A. Attract the right kind of people to the organization. We don't want to bottom feed. We want the highest quality people we can get for our money. The R is to retain those people. And again, which ones? We want to retain the best. So going back to what Steve said, if you have limited resources, let's identify our best people and make sure we're using those resources for the best people, the nucleus that we need to grow in the future. You can never grow a company by truncating your workforce. You can only grow it by hiring the right people and growing. And the M, of course, is motivation. So we have attract, retain, motivate. And the F for FARM is to focus. We want to focus attention on desired results. So if, for example, you have salespeople, what do salespeople do? There is a truism here. Salespeople like to sell in their comfort zone. And that comfort zone may not necessarily be what the HR people want or what the company wants. Therefore, the compensation program needs to focus their attention on desired results. That's the whole concept behind the MBO programs, the whole concept besides goal setting for incentive plans and so forth, is to focus attention on desired results. So that's the first acronym I want you to remember. The second one is GRATE, G-R-A-T-E. Not great like Alexander the Great, but great as in a hole in the ground over on the road where water pours into. G stands for one of the most popular words that we have seen coming out of the media over the last year. Greed. And I think we can all relate to that. There are very, very few executives who say, give me less. So, G is for greed. R stands for regulations. Regulations are ones that are coming out that, and we're talking about the design of executive compensation. Where is it going? Where is it now, and where will it go? R stands for regulations. Sarbanes-Oxley came out with regulations. There were some things in it that were very peculiar. It said you can't give loans to officers anymore. Now, there were some very beneficial uses for them. There, unfortunately, were also abuses. One of the uses of the loans was something called a bridge loan. So if you go out and hire a senior level executive, that senior executive has to move to your location. You probably expect that person not to live out of a shoebox or a suitcase, but rather to move their family from wherever they were to where you are now, your location. So we go back to last year, earlier this year, I guess, when the HP hired a new president, new CEO. He moved from the Midwest to